So let's go back to our discussion of managed services here. So you've established for me that it's different than, I've threw up some examples of how, it used to be all about cutting costs and getting cheaper and not really about quality. You've said some interesting things, but you said a lot of things, and I want to really hone in on one thing. You've talked about how there's a surgical approach. I like the imagery there. It's a little too close to cutting, cost cutting. You're not using that as a euphemism for cost cutting. What is it you mean when you say surgical approach?
And that's a great question. So when I talk about a surgical approach, it goes back to I have finite resources, my staff, my infrastructure. What's the best way for me to provide, as a business owner or as a CIO, for example, what's the best way for me to add value to my organization? Is it by doing the things that are unique, where we can grow our revenue streams? Or is it by tying up my finite resources on things that there's many options for me to go outside the company to solve those problems?
Multiple options. That works.
Multiple options. Right? So by being surgical, what I mean is taking those IT functions that lend themselves to being outsourced and prioritizing so those functions are provided by someone who's a specialist that focuses on providing a much higher level of service, again at a lower cost than my resources could provide, while my resources drive the strategies of the business and help me grow new revenue streams and compete.
So I really had the wrong idea about this intriguing analogy of yours. I was thinking of surgical approach being pulling something out, targeting something and pulling it out of the organization and giving it to someone else, as might do in an operation. I was caught up in this imagery of somebody cutting into a body and pulling something out. But what you were saying is more of surgical approach. You're bringing in a specialist to do one thing right that you are not really investing in yourself. We wouldn't turn to, as a company, we wouldn't become a specialist in email technology just because we use it. We should turn to somebody else who knows it better than we ever could or would want to invest in. Is that right, or am I still?
You're exactly right. A common analogy would be you're a consumer of power, but that doesn't mean you have to build your own power plant, in your backyard and generate the power yourself. So pick the things you want to be good at that are strategic for your business. That's where you invest your resources. And
that's different than what they were doing before, because we used to pay lip service to that concept in the past, and you're saying that really isn't how it was going down?
The advances in technology have made it provided a lot of additional options, so these specialists can provide these services at a much lower cost but a higher quality of service.
So in the past it was more or less an ideal, managed services. Again, I'm doing a story about this whole sweeping issue of, are managed services really what we say they are? And in the past, so what you're saying is that we may have aspired to these things, but we really weren't achieving them, and today, because technology has advanced, we can do it.
So, and that's a great question, and one of the ways that Laurus is able to help our customers with that is the promise or the ideal case where you could dramatically reduce your costs and get a better level of service. It's absolutely achievable, but there are a lot of details, a lot of complexity in terms of finding a service that will meet your business requirements without providing or creating roadblocks or other constraints on your business that could hurt it. So Laurus, the way we help our customers is to be really have very deep expertise in understanding exactly how these services operate, how they can help, and then obviously there's always some pitfalls or landmines that you need people who are savvy to help steer you around.
So what have I missed in our conversation?
So I think it's been a good conversation. I think one of the key things that we should talk about is security in terms of managed services. This comes up fairly frequently. There are some myths out there about security, And I think
What's the biggest one?
the biggest
So
myth
we
that
only have a certain amount of time, so give me the biggest one.
biggest myth that we hear is, I'm concerned that this service that I'm going to purchase is not going to be as secure as if I delivered this service internally with my own resources. And the big myth there is, or the big misnomer there is that customers actually believe that these services are less secure. They're not. The top service providers have extensive staff expertise around security. The best providers have certifications around SAS 70. They're audited several times a year. Typically, this is a much, much higher level of security than our customers are able to cost justify when they do this themselves.